We do invite you to please mute yourselves unless, of course, you are asking a question. You can also put your question in the chat. Okay. I would like to say good afternoon and thank you for attending Governor State University's School of Extended Learning's presentation from the U.S. Department of Labor on essential workers, essential protection.
I'm coming to beg to get the driver as soon as possible.
As soon as possible. Yeah.
So what does it mean to pull the DMV notice? What does
Please
this mean?
mute yourselves. Thank you. Please welcome Fidel Arroyo Jr. from CORE at the U.S. Department of Labor, the Wage and Hour Division. Welcome, Fidel. And please also welcome Madge Bean, Governor State University alumni from our Public Administration program. Madge serves as an investigator with the U.S. Department of Labor. So welcome. We are looking forward to learning a bit more about essential workers, essential protections. And without further ado, I give you both the floor. Thank you so much. Please put your questions in the chat.
Thank you, Michelle.
Thank you, Michelle. So hello, everybody, and good morning. Thank you, Mrs. Stacy Amadeo, Dr. Mary Bruce, and Michelle Sabasco, and all our friends from Governor State University for giving us this time to present this important information to all the alumni and community GSU. And also, I would like to take this time to thank my colleague, Senior Investigator Madge Bean, for taking the time from her very busy schedule to help with this event. So thank you, everybody. My name is Fidel Arroyo, and I am the core for the U.S. Department of Labor Wage and Hour Division for the Chicago District Office. Part of my job as a representative for the Chicago District Office is to update the community organizations on our enforcement on labor standards. So throughout this pandemic, millions of employees across the country have remained on the job despite potential exposures to themselves in the workplace. We have been and are committed to continue to educate both employees and employers by using both outreach and enforcement initiatives to ensure workplace protections for all workers. So I'm here, and also Madge, here today to target outreach and education efforts to ensure the community of GSU that we don't only enforce labor laws, but we are also a tool, a resource to those who seek information on labor laws and how to be in compliance with the law. My effort is to ensure employers understand the responsibilities and that our division is available to answer any of their questions or their concerns. It is also important to understand that the federal department that I represent remains fully operational and committed to our mission. So thank you, everybody, for your time. Before I begin my presentation, Madge, can you please give an introduction of who you are and what do you do for our office, and also that you're an alumni of GSU?
Okay, I'm Madge Bean. Thank you for coming. Actually, I am an alumni of GSU. I was a public administration. That was approximately, I think Michelle asked me earlier and I had to kind of think about it. About 2005, I graduated from that program. From that point on, I actually started working for the government based on that master's degree that I received from Governor State. And so I've been with the Department of Labor as an investigator for a while. And so I'm actually involved in the enforcement part of it and also the education part of it, making sure, being a resource for employers and employees as to what the Department of Labor actually does and what we can provide and what information is available for the community. So I am also a resource. So my information will be provided at the end if you have any questions, or not, if not today, tomorrow, in the future. Thank you, Fidel.
Thank you, Madge. So I normally don't read off from a PowerPoint presentation slides when I do a presentation. So I'm hopeful that everybody here will be engaged and hopefully we can have a discussion. So you can enter your questions in the chat box and Investigator Madge will be reviewing the questions on the chat box. And if the questions are related to what I'm covering at that moment, then she will interrupt me and we will try to answer the questions. But if it's not related to what I'm covering at that time, she'll hold it off till the end of the presentation. So please feel free to ask questions. Before I begin my presentation, I would like to just state our disclaimer that the following presentation is intended as a general information only and does not carry the force of legal opinion. So you might be asking yourself, who are we? Who is the Wage Hour Division? So we are a federal civil law enforcement agency under the U.S. Department of Labor, which is a cabinet level department of the U.S. federal government. So, and our job is to enforce several labor acts and laws, such as the FLSA, which is the Fair Labor Standards Act, that includes the federal minimum wage, overtime, record keeping, and child labor requirements, and also the Family Medical Leave Act that we all refer to as FMLA. We also administer and enforce many other laws and acts. We are one of the agencies under the U.S. Department of Labor, and there are around 26 other agencies, programs under the U.S. Department of Labor, such as EBSA, which is EBSA, which stands for Employee Benefit Security Administration, BLS, which is the Bureau of Labor Statistics, OSHA, which is the Occupational Safety and Health Administration. There are so many other more agencies under the U.S. Department of Labor. Together, we are an organization with diverse functions that carries out our missions through a number of offices and agencies that is both important and vital to our country. We all make every effort to collaborate together to achieve our missions to protect and enhance the welfare of our nation's workforce. Our mission is to promote and achieve compliance with labor standards to protect and enhance the welfare of all workers in the United States. And we do that by not only enforcing the laws through our federal investigations, but to educate both employees and employers through outreach coordination. We maintain strong relationships with other federal agencies to foster communications and better serve our nation's workers and businesses alike. We also have MOUs, which are Memorandum of Understandings, with other federal agencies concerning the various laws that our division enforces. So these partnerships provide for data sharing, referrals, coordinated enforcement, joint outreach, and compliance assistance. These partnerships maximize our impact and corresponding benefits for both businesses and workers. And you might be wondering, how does the Wage and Hour Division differ from the Illinois Department of Labor? One of the differences between the Wage and Hour Division and either the local or state agencies like the Illinois Department of Labor is that their activities are generally limited to jurisdictions that they are assigned to. In this case, the Illinois Department of Labor, they are limited to just enforcement in the state of Illinois only, as opposed to our division, which is nationwide, including US territories in the Atlantic Islands, and as far as Guam, which is located deep in the Pacific. Also, there are laws that they enforce that we don't enforce, and vice versa. How does Wage and Hour Division work with employers? We always work with employers. We always try to do to engage with them by doing outreach. We make every effort to communicate with the chambers of commerce, other employer associations, and we offer our services to them, like the presentations that we're doing right now, and how to be in compliance, and taking questions or concerns through these presentations. And not only do we offer presentations to employers from our outreach, but we also try to educate employers during an investigation. After each investigation, our investigators analyze all the information that they gathered during the investigation process, and they present that information to the employer, and they discuss the findings from the investigation process. Also, the investigators go over with the employer what they need to do or change in order for them to be in compliance with all laws. As you may already know, our department will never have enough investigators to investigate or examine every business. So it is also my job to prioritize and direct the resources to where the data and evidence from our investigations show where the problems are largest. So it is important for me to maintain and coordinate relationships with community organizations that represent both the employees and employers. So anybody who's here today who represents an association or the chambers of commerce or any community organization, and you would like for us to do a presentation specifically on the industry that you focus on, you can give us a call and we can schedule something and work together to make that happen. So let's begin with our presentation. Let me just share. Just let me know if you can see the slide. Can you see that, Madge?
Yes.
Okay, so I wanted to ensure that the public knows that the Wage and Hour Division is focused on protecting the workforce and supporting essential workers who continue to keep moving us forward, even through this pandemic. This presentation is intended as a general information only and does not carry, like I said, the force of legal opinion. Here's our disclaimer for your review. I will give it a couple seconds and then before moving on. Okay, so who are we? Just some insight on what our investigators face on a daily basis when interviewing employees. Sometimes employees don't know who we are or never heard of us before. And for those who do know about us or think that they know about us, there are some employees out there who have a negative opinion about us. And it's kind of difficult to get interview statements from them. So we are very hopeful that with our outreach efforts, we are able to change that. And we want to share with you and walk you through how we are responsible of enforcing some of the nation's most comprehensive federal labor laws on minimum wage, overtime, record keeping, child labor responsibilities, and Family Medical Leave Act. So that's who we are. We are an agency who seeks compliance from employers and protecting workers. The Wage and Hour helps workers, advocates, employers, and other stakeholders understand worker protections and employer responsibilities during the COVID-19 pandemic. The value of workers who have remained on the job despite any dangers to themselves to serve the greater good and to ensure that the American economy continues to move ahead. Our labor laws cover all workers regardless of their immigration status. Our protections apply regardless of the status, and the workers are not questioned about their status by our staff. So when we interview them, we don't even ask them a question about whether or not, what are their immigration status. So the Wage and Hour has been and is open for business, and we're always willing and ready to help. Our goal today is to share the information about workers' rights and to hear from you on what information can be most helpful for working people as we reach out to the workers throughout the country. We plan to invest in our outreach efforts at the local level to engage stakeholders and ensure that this information gets into the hands of those who need it. And we are proud to support and protect the workers and are dedicated to ensuring that they know the critical workplace protections and how we're available to them during this pandemic. We wanted to share these statistics so you all can see the numbers along with the message we're trying to provide today. This is not to scare employers. This is just an idea of how effective our investigations are. And it's important that the employers stay in compliance because computing back wages and assessing civil money penalties and liquidated damages on top of those back wages is not something that an investigator looks forward to. Am I correct, Madge?
Yes.
It's not an easy task to do, but it must be done. I mean, if an employee is owed back wages, then it's our job to compute those back wages. This is just a visual, so you see how you can avoid being one of those employers who has to pay back wages. So we're always available to take any of the questions or concerns that you have. So right here, you see that within the past 5 years, we've helped over 1.3 million workers from our investigations. And from those workers, we've recovered over 1.4 billion in back wages in the last 5 years from our investigations. And that's just in back wages. That's not even counting civil money penalties on top of liquidated damages. So it's very important that you try to avoid not being in compliance. And I understand that employers sometimes don't know that they're not in compliance, but that's why it's their responsibility to find out what their responsibilities are by calling us, and that they know that we're available to them. So to achieve our mission, we draw on a set of tools that include the following enforcement: both complaint and directed investigations, outreach and educating the employees and employers, and partnerships with agencies, community organizations, business associations, and other stakeholders. By using these tools, our success will be measured in terms of improving compliance levels. So this is some of the tools that we use to achieve compliance. So strategic enforcement initiatives. Each year, we conduct strategic enforcement and education initiatives in low-wage industries. We focus our largest efforts targeting investigations and education where evidence shows violations are greatest, where workers are hit hardest by not being paid what our laws require, and where the workers are least likely to exercise their rights provided by the law. Regardless of the particular reason that prompted the investigation, all wage and hour investigations are conducted in a similar manner. With greater access to technology, data, and evaluation methods, we have strengthened how we identify and prioritize industries for enforcement. We further rely on series of evaluations, research, emerging data practices developed through the strategic planning process to focus resources on specific sectors within those industries where local enforcement may have the greatest effect. So my job as the core, not only am I the representative for the U.S. Department for the Chicago District Office, but it's my job to plan and do research from the previous investigations from the previous fiscal year, from reviewing all the cases that the investigators have conducted. And from there, I push forward that information over to Washington, our regional office in Washington, DC. And we collaborate together to plan for the next fiscal year on which industries to target. And so, and that's from the information that we get from our investigators. So it's very critical. Every investigation is taken serious, and the investigators collect all the data that we require them to collect. And I use that information to better target the industries where the violations are more likely to be in violations. So as far as compliance assistance, we have long maintained enforcement alone will not be sufficient to achieve our mission. Education and outreach to workers and employers has been and will continue to be one of the division's key strategies for protecting the workplace and promoting compliance. So as far as outreach, in fiscal year 2020, we've conducted a record of 4,600 outreach events and presentations like the one like today, providing valuable information and compliance assistance to thousands of employers, employees, and industry associations. So, and it's free. So if you give us a call and you request that there be a speaker to your next meeting with your members, we'll schedule something, we'll work something out, and you can request what specifically you would like for us to talk about. Either it's the FLSA, Family Medical Leave Act, the Davis-Bacon Related Act, or the Service Contract Act, agricultural, H-2A cases, H-2B cases, and the list goes on. We have so many laws that we enforce. We can't cover it all today, but just give us a call and with any of your questions, and we'll help you out. Again, we are committed to working with stakeholders to ensure that all workers receive the rights and protection that the law provides. On increasing our impact, we welcome your help in identifying community partners, worker advocates, and employers who are interested in ensuring workers' rights are protected and the playing field is level for all employers. That's very important for us as well. We serve workers by focusing on workers in sectors where data and evidence show us violations are high, but wages are complaints are low. We serve employers through our enforcement, leveling the playing field for employers who play by the rules. It's not fair if in the community there are 10 of the same industry establishments, and out of those 10, there's only 3 where the employer does everything to be in compliance, but the other 7 don't. And those 3 are barely making it in the business because they can't compete with the other 7. So that's our goal too, to level the playing field for all employers so that everybody will play by the rules. So we also focus on industries where the data and evidence show the violations are high and the workers are unlikely to complain. And here are some examples of those industries where it's unlikely that an employee will file the complaint. So agriculture, healthcare, grocery stores, delivery service, some first responders, public transportation, restaurants, it happens all the time, construction, security guards, hotel workers, landscaping, and janitorial services. These essential workers are unlikely to file a complaint, but the evidence show from our previous investigations that the violations are high. higher than the other industries. So examples of issues related to low wages, minimum wage violations as a result of illegal deductions, such as work time for meal breaks that were not actually taken, deductions for uniforms that bring the worker below the minimum wage, pre and post shift work that does not get recorded or paid for. So off the clock hours work. Employers misclassifying employees as independent contractors to avoid minimum wage and overtime obligations. That happens all the time. Now we're going to go into essential protections under the Fair Labor Standards Act. So the FLSA requires payment of the current federal minimum wage of $7.25. Obviously, each state, county, or city might have a higher minimum wage. We don't enforce that high minimum wage unless there's an overtime issue, but that's on a case-by-case basis. And but for right now, the minimum wage for the federal is $7.25. Payment of overtime at time and a half, a worker's regular rate of pay for hours worked of 40 hours in a work week. We've had cases, and Madge can agree with me, where an employer, and it happens all the time, they don't pay overtime until 80 hours. And that's because they're like, the reason is because I pay every 2 weeks. So I think that I should pay overtime after 80 hours instead of 40 hours. So what they do is they have those employees working the first week 60 hours, and in the second week they'll have them work, just an example, 20 hours to avoid paying overtime. So when we go in there and do an investigation, we compute back wages and we show them and notify them that they owe back wages. And they're like, why? None of my workers work overtime. And we're like, yes, they do. According to the Fair Labor Standards Act, every work week stands alone. And these employees, for the first week of every pay period, they work 20 hours overtime that were not paid. They were paid a straight time. In the second week, they only work 20 hours. But even though you paid every 2 weeks, you're still obligated to pay overtime after 40 hours for each work week. Every work week stands alone. So accurate record keeping for employees, including a breakdown of daily and weekly hours worked, are needed. Also, wages paid and deductions were made. Also, protections for young workers under the child labor portion of the act. So all those are essential for the Fair Labor Standards Act. So the pandemic has surfaced many questions related to payment for hours worked. Schedules have changed, duties have changed, and for many workers, their work site has changed as well. All of these changes led to questions about what constitutes work time that employer must pay and what doesn't. Employees covered under the FLSA must be paid for all hours worked in a work week. In general, hours worked includes all time an employee must be on duty or the employer's premises or other prescribed place of work. From the beginning of the principal activity of work to the end of the last principal work activity of the workday. Also included is additional time the employee is allowed to work, what we call suffered or permitted to work. Workday in general means all the hours between the time an employee begins work and ends with work on a particular day. And here are some of the examples, questions we are hearing so far from our, when we take complaints. So it says, the question is, my employer requires all employees to take their temperature related to COVID-19 before entering the job site. Do I need to be paid for the time spent taking my temperature? And under the FLSA, your employer is required to pay you for all hours that you work, including for time before you begin your normal working hours, if the task that you are required to perform is necessary for you to work, for the work that you do. For many employees, undergoing a temperature check before they begin work must be paid because it is necessary for their jobs. In other words, the temperature check is necessary and indispensable to do your job. So the answer is yes. One of the most common violations we see in our investigation is when an employer pays an employee a bonus payment on top of the regular payment and not adding that bonus amount to the regular rate when the employee worked overtime during the same work week. And on top of that, the employer paid the employee straight time for all hours worked. Usually in that same scenario, the employer will state that the bonus should cover the overtime not paid, and that is not acceptable. What we do is how we calculate to get the correct hourly rate is that we divide the total gross pay to the employer in that particular week by the total hours that they worked. And you get the correct hourly rate for that work week. So let's keep in mind that every work week stands alone according to the FLSA, and that is because every work week, for the most part, we don't always work the same hours. So therefore, it's more likely that the hourly rate will change. And we see that all the time, right, Madge? They're like, oh, I
Yes,
pay a
we do.
bonus. That should cover the overtime. And if you calculate it that way, it does cover. If it was, you should have just paid the overtime and recorded it on your records, meaning the payroll summaries, to show that you paid overtime. But because you recorded it as a bonus, the FLSA doesn't see that as overtime payment. So that's why we enforce and we calculate overtime. And that's why it's very important that employers keep and maintain records. I'll give you an example to everybody here. I was an investigator before I became a core, and some of the investigations that I had, I've conducted an investigation where I wasn't able to substantiate any violations, but it was pretty close. So what the investigators have is a final conference at the end of the investigation process. And that's when the investigator and the employer representatives sit together and discuss the process and any findings that the investigator were able to substantiate. And the employer the whole time, the owner of the company, was so nervous that he just wanted me to let him know whether or not how much he was supposed to pay back wages. And I came there with no back wages computed. But it is my job as an investigator and all the investigators to explain what happened in the investigation process and to sort of educate the employer on what could possibly go wrong, if they don't make some changes. So I sat there, and I saw that the owner of the company, the employer, and he was so nervous. He couldn't sit down. He just looked like one of those children in school where had too much sugar, couldn't sit down in his chair. So I knew that's what he wanted to hear. So I normally didn't do that, but I notified them that although there was no back wages that I computed or that he owes, it is important that I go over some of the things that I think could affect them in the future, because we will be back to do a reinvestigation. And it's important that he understands what changes he needs to make. And he was so happy. He wanted to jump and he was just overwhelmed. He was just so happy that when I was explaining to him on what he needed to watch out for, it went to one ear and went the other. And I was telling him the importance about record keeping. I told him, the law says that you have to keep and maintain accurate and detailed records, meaning payroll records and corresponding timesheets. So when an investigator comes to your establishment to do an investigation, he or she can compare the timesheets with the corresponding payroll summaries to make sure that they're accurate. And that's not what he was doing, but fortunately for him, his employees were being truthful. Good employees. They could have easily said that they worked 60 hours when they really were working for 40. And because he didn't have accurate detailed records, it would have been their word against his, because that's the only responsibility that an employer has, to keep records. Records is the employer's best defense that they have. If you don't have those records, then your defense goes down. You don't have that protection no more. And I was telling him, you got lucky this time. And I'm not saying that you weren't paying correctly, but there are some employees out there who know the game. And they can easily have said that I worked 60 to 70 hours. But I wouldn't know if he or she are telling the truth because I'm not there. But if I have like 7 interviews that are saying that they didn't get paid overtime and you don't keep records, then we're going to compute based on that because you didn't keep any records. So it's their word against yours, because that's all you have to keep, records, and pay correctly. And so
Fidel,
that's
we
just
have
an example.
excuse me, Fidel. We have a question regarding the time spent in line for the temperature check for Samuel Marvin. He had asked, how would you calculate back pay for workers who weren't compensated for getting their temperatures checked before the start of their shift? And what you would have to do in that case?
So that's a very good question. And I'm going to try to answer it as best as I can. So what I would do as an employer, if you have, it sounds like it's a big company. So I imagine that if it takes anywhere from 5 minutes to get to take your temperature check, you have a large amount of employees at that establishment. So what I would do as an employer, what I would do is, as soon as they walk in the door, clock in, and then have them go and stand in line, because they're engaged to wait. When you're engaged to wait at the employer's premises, that's compensable time. And let's say you don't keep those, you don't have them punching in as soon as they come in because they have to get this temperature check and they're waiting in line for their turn. The way we will compute it is employee interviews, because you didn't keep those records. They were not accurate because you didn't have them clock in as soon as they walked in when they had to wait in line to take the temperature. So the way I would compute it was I would interview all the employees and from there get an average time that it takes them from the time they walk in the door to the time that they get the temperature check. How much of that time is it takes, and then I would multiply it by the time, the days that they work and the times that they actually do it. So if it's 15 minutes that it takes them to get to point A to point B to get the temperature, then I will multiply that. And they say they work 5 days a week. I will multiply that by 5. Now, is that fair? It might not be, because maybe some employees take less, but because you didn't keep accurate records, again, it's their word against yours. So in that situation, what I would do when you have a lot of employees is I would just I know it's, I don't mean to say simply, but I would say have them just clock in, have them sign in as soon as they get in the door, if it's gonna take them a time to get their temperature checked. So I don't know if that answered your question.
So in the example that Fidel gave, about 15 minutes per day, and if it's 5 days, so if you worked, that means an hour and 25 minutes would be added to that number of hours worked in that work week.
Yeah,
What was owed, what was unpaid.
yeah, and then it all depends on when did that start. So one of the questions that we will ask the employee when we interview them is, when did this start? You know, how long have you been doing this for? Oh, we've been doing it for 2 months. Then we calculate from the time that we initially took the interview, going back 2 months, and that will multiply it by each employee. So yeah, so that's why it's very important that you keep those records and they're accurate as best as you can, and you won't have to worry about back wages. So hopefully that answered your question. I'm sorry, I didn't know what was his or her name.
Yeah, they said, thank you for your response. So they're
Okay. So yeah, great question. So now a visual of an example of a bonus. So this employee, remember, didn't get paid overtime. He got straight time for all hours work, but he got a bonus. So here, just an example. So this person worked 50 hours at $10 an hour per hour. That's the regular rate that they're paying this employee. And they gave him a $100 bonus that week. So the total compensation is $600. So here, there is the violation, overtime violation. Number one, they paid him straight time for all hours work, and they didn't add that bonus into the regular rate. So how do we do that? We divide the total gross paid to the employee, and we divide it by the hours that he actually worked. And it gives you a regular rate. So now 12 times 1.5, which is time and a half, is $18. So $18 must be paid for every hour worked in overtime. So in this example, 10 hours is worked in overtime times 18, that's $180 that is owed in overtime for this person. So I can't tell you not to pay them a bonus, but it just makes it a little bit more difficult because employers they think that by paying the bonus, it covers their overtime, and that's not necessarily true, according to the FLSA. And it makes it more difficult because now the regular rate is higher and the overtime rate will be higher as well. And it changes because not every week they work the same hours. Some weeks they work less, 45. Some weeks they might work 60 or 70 hours. So the regular rate changes and the overtime rate changes as well. And it just adds up because when we do an investigation, we go back 2 years. So that's 104 weeks. If this happens every week, we multiply it by 104 weeks. And yeah, it adds up. And then you have to multiply it by each employee. So those back wages, they're painful. They're painful. All right, so here's another question. I am an employee of a private employer that began paying me incentive payments, such as hazard pay for working during the COVID-19 emergency. Do those incentive payments have to be included in the regular rate that is used to compute my overtime pay? And the answer is yes. Payments your employer provides you to perform work should be included and must be included in the regular rate. Now let's talk about essential protections under the Family Medical Leave Act. So just sort of questions about time off for medical reasons. The FFCRA, which was the Family First Coronavirus Response Act, which required many employers to give many workers 2 weeks of paid sick leave for coronavirus related reasons. It expired in December 31st of 2020. So even though it expired in 2020, we're still doing investigations for those who were affected by it. So if you believe that you were denied paid sick leave prior to December 31st, 2020, you have 2 years from the time that you were denied the leave to file the claim with our office. So many situations occurred during COVID-19 that are also covered by the Family Medical Leave Act. The Family Medical Leave Act provides 12 weeks of unpaid job protected leave to eligible workers to care for themselves or family members with serious health conditions that are related to COVID-19. So here are the essential protections under the FMLA. 12 work weeks of unpaid leave for a year for qualifying reasons. You also get job protection, and there's also protection of benefits and status while on leave. Return to the same or equivalent position when you no longer need the FMLA. So if you have any questions about the medical leave, the family medical leave, you can see our FMLA resource and information, or you can give us a call. The website where you can find more information under the FMLA and the FFCRA, which is the Family First Coronavirus Response Act, you can go on www.dol.gov/agencies/WHD/FMLA. I'll share that information at the end of the presentation as well, in case you didn't get the whole website right now. So the question here is, can an employee who is sick with COVID-19 or who is caring for a family member who is sick with COVID-19 take FMLA leave? An employee who works for a covered employer is eligible for FMLA and is sick or is caring for a family member who is sick with COVID-19 may be entitled to leave under the FMLA under certain circumstances. An FMLA eligible employee can take up to 12 weeks of unpaid leave, job protective leave, in a designated 12-month leave year for specified family medical reasons, and including serious health condition as defined by the FMLA. So the most common serious health conditions that qualify for FMLA include conditions requiring an overnight stay in a hospital or other medical care facility, conditions that disables an employee or the employee's family member, for example, unable to work for more than 3 consecutive days, and that includes ongoing medical treatment, either multiple appointments with a healthcare provider or a single appointment or a follow-up care. Chronic conditions that cause occasional periods when the employee or the employee's family member is disabled and which requires treatment by a healthcare provider at least twice a year. Workers who are ill with COVID-19 or have a family member with COVID-19 are urged to stay at home to minimize the spread of the pandemic. Employers are encouraged to support these and other community mitigation strategies and should consider flexible leave policies for their employees. While the requirement that employers provide paid sick leave and expanded family medical leave under the Family First Coronavirus Response Act, the FFCRA, that expired in December 31st of 2020, there are still tax credits that remain available to employers who volunteer and continue to provide paid sick leave for COVID-19 related reasons. Employers who choose to provide such leave between January 1st, 2021 and September 30th, 2021 may be eligible for employer tax credits. So I would like to point out that I don't, me or Madge, well, I don't know about Madge, but I don't specialize in tax credits offered by different federal agencies. I think it's important though that I share this information to everyone for additional questions or concerns in regards to the tax credits that I just mentioned. Please visit irs.gov because they're the ones who handle and they're the experts on those tax credits. 2020 was a very challenging year for all businesses, especially small businesses, which have been hit specifically hard by the pandemic. In order to help small businesses retain their employees and keep the workplaces safe, Congress authorized significant tax credits for employee retention and paid sick and family leave. In 2020, we were proud of the work that we did to implement like the paid sick leave provisions under the FFCRA. And even though it expired in December, please note that the American Rescue Plan extended those tax credits for employers who provided paid sick leave for COVID-related reasons. And it goes up to, like I said, September 30th of this year. So essential protections for agricultural workers. It doesn't really apply for Chicago. We don't do many cases with agricultural employees. Our neighboring district office like Milwaukee, Minneapolis, Grand Rapids, Michigan, Indianapolis, they handle the agricultural investigations. And some of the investigators from our office, we assist them in those cases. But if you have any questions in regards to agricultural work or businesses, give us a call. We will forward you and information about it, or we'll go over with you the questions that you or concerns that you might have. So that's why I won't be covering it today, but I just wanted to just explain that briefly to everybody who's listening today. So how to file a complaint? Complaints are confidential when they file with us. We do not share the complainant's names with the employers or even confirm that a complaint was filed. And again, we enforce the law regardless of the immigration status. So I think the first question that happens when we initiate an investigation, right, Madge? I don't know if you get the same thing, but when I was an investigator, the first question that an employer would tell us, who filed the complaint? And I tell them, I never said that somebody filed a complaint. We're here to do an investigation, and we will never let you know whether or not this is a directed case or somebody filed the complaint. And they're so adamant about finding out who filed the complaint. I said, it doesn't really matter who filed the complaint. The point is that we're here, and regardless if it was a complaint or directed cases, the process is the same. We're not going to go away. And so, we try to encourage them to please don't focus on who filed the complaint, but focus on providing the records that we are requesting from you. And so to move it along, you can't change what happened 2 years ago. They always tell us, well, I'm going to change everything. Well, that's fine. That's what we want, compliance. But we got to fix what happened 2 years. So if you ever have a wage and hour investigator at your establishment, you'll never know if it was a complaint based, what started the investigation, or it was a direct case. Even if once the case is closed, even if you foil the case, you still will know who filed a complaint if somebody filed a complaint or if it was a directed case. So like I said, complaints are confidential. None of that is shared with any of the employers or the employee representatives. And so I will give our telephone number at the end of the presentation. So if anybody has any questions, they can give us a call. And who may file a complaint?
Yeah, I just wanted to give you a time check. We're about 2 minutes before the end of the session.
Okay, I'm almost done. I got 2 more pages. So who may file a complaint? Employees, parents and guardians, school officials. Other employers can file complaints about other employers, and it happens all the time. Advocacy groups and other law enforcement agencies can file a complaint.
All right, and Fidel, hold on before you go to the, we have a question. How many workers do you need to file a complaint before you were to investigate the entire company? It's not the number of people who file a complaint, it's the actual complaint. Because if one person calls and it's happening to other employees, that is going to initiate a company-wide investigation.
And, you know, sometimes the person who files a complaint, even if it's one person, either has a lot of information that they provide when they file the complaint. We're talking about pay stubs, records, and just they explain to us the whole, how the employer operates, and they give us names of other employees. And not only that, sometimes employees come in and they said, I'm the only one filing a complaint because everybody else is scared to file a complaint, but they are willing and ready to be interviewed with you or anybody, whoever's in charge of the case. And they provide the telephone numbers. But we don't just take a complaint because there is this one employee. We really ask a lot of questions. We don't just take a complaint just to take a complaint. We go over the information. We ask a lot of questions. We go over how the employer operates, and we covered the minimum wage, overtime, records, and also child labor, if it applies. But it's the complaint intake process. There's a lot of information from it.
And also to let you know, for the Federal Department of Labor to have jurisdiction over a company or to do a company-wide investigation will require 2 or more employees, annual sales of at least 500,000, and to be engaged in interstate commerce. So, and that kind of is that ADV of 500,000, that can also be in the neighborhood of 500,000. It's kind of like based on how many businesses they own also, because they had several different establishments all related and they're all say at 400 or 300. When you combine all those together, that is going to make them one enterprise, and that will still give us the sales. So there's some other things that go into it, and that can be clarified more if you have, like if you gave us a call, because there's a lot of things that come into play there.
Right. So right here, this slide, when we find violations, we often recover unpaid wages on behalf of employees. We make every effort to locate and notify all employees that are due back wages. And what I mean by that is former employees. If we cannot find an employee, we hold their back wages for 3 years while we continue our efforts to locate them. And after those 3 years, if we remain unable to find that person, we are required to send that money to the U.S. Treasury. And so if you think that you may be owed back wages, or if you know anybody that may be owed back wages from the Wage and Hour division, you can submit a claim. To begin, just head to that website right here, www.dol.gov /wow, WOW, and enter your employer's name, and then click the WOW search. And from there, names will appear that are all back wages. We also offer web pages which provide direct access to department-wide resources in one stop. So worker.gov, this site covers common workplace concerns and federal labor laws to protect you. So like the right to be paid properly, to a safe and healthy workplace, to be treated equally, to join with coworkers, to be treated fairly as a veteran or a service member, and much more. So visit www.worker.gov. And as far as for employer.gov, this is a resources for employers. You may have questions about your role as an employer. This site provides answers to common questions about workers and businesses. So for more information about that, go to employer.gov. So I encourage everybody here to contact us if you need additional assistance. You can call or visit our website at www.dol.gov/agencies/WHD, and you will be directed to the nearest wage and hour division or district office for assistance. Or you can call toll free 1-866-487-9243, which is nationwide. Or you can call the Chicago district office 312-789-2992. And there too, they will take your questions and concerns. You won't be asked what's your name or what company you're from. And it's completely free. If you need a poster, they'll mail you a poster. If you want fact sheets, opinion letters, any resources that we can provide for the company or for employees, we'll send them to you. It's free. You know, we have investigators who take live calls. We have wage hour technicians who take the calls as well. And they're all professionals. They're always very informative. If they don't know an answer to your question, they'll get somebody else to call you right back. I don't know if there's any more questions, but that concludes our presentation. And I'm very hopeful that if your organization will want a presentation to specifically talk about the industry that impacts your organization, give us a call and we can set something up.
I just want to thank you guys so much for your time and answering all the questions and your detailed presentation. I do want to close by saying that this presentation will be available as a recording. So if you wanted to review that or rewind and go over a detail again, you will be able to. So I'll send that video out. And I would like to just invite anybody, if you have any final questions, we can take maybe another 30 seconds, a minute to answer any final questions. Go ahead and unmute yourself or type it in the chat. All right, I think we're all set. Thank you guys so much. We really, really appreciate your time, and I'll send you the recording as well so you guys can utilize it as well.
Thank you so
Thank
much,
you.
Michelle, Stacy,
All right.
and everybody.
Thank you. Thank you,
GSU.
Stacy. Thank you, everyone. Have a good day.
Take
Thank you,
care.
Madge. Appreciate
Bye-bye.
it.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.